Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman of Rankin Technical College. Today, we will be going over Chapter 1 of Murach's HTML and CSS book. These chapter lectures are not a replacement for reading the chapters, but rather meant to complement the textbook. Reading the chapters are important to understand the concepts and also doing well on the assignments, especially the written test. Besides going over some of the important information contained in these chapters, we will also discuss some areas a little more in depth. So let's get started. So today we will go over the components of a web application. We'll discuss the differences between an intranet and an intranet. Talk a little bit about HTTP requests and responses. We'll discuss the differences between a static web page and a dynamic web page, and I'll demonstrate the differences for you. We'll also briefly go over kind of the whole meat of this course, which is the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We will explain how to deploy a website, discuss the components of a HTTP URL, and we will briefly discuss, and I'll show you a couple little demonstrations on some areas regarding common web development issues, which is responsive web design, cross-browser compatibility, web accessibility, and search engine optimization. So the components of a web application are, as you can see here, are these clients, which a client could be a desktop computer, tablet, smartphone, or other device, and a server. As you can see up the top right here is a web server. So a web application is a client server application. These are being the client, and that's being a web server, the server, and access to that via the internet. Regarding network, just wanted to touch on local area networks and wide area networks. A local area network is just a small geographic area. You look at it as, it has home here. Well, we're gonna discuss a little bit more about this in a few more slides ahead. But a small geographic area, like an office or a school, and it does have home here as well. And how that is different than a wide area network. Wide area network connects multiple local area networks and often used by organizations to interconnect their local area networks, right? This is the architecture of the internet, where you can see that on the outside, you'll see the local area networks, and more on the inside, you'll see the wide area networks connected by IXPs. And you just look at a network as a system that allows clients and servers to communicate. The internet is a large network that consists of smaller networks. And the internet is the world's largest computer network, connecting billions of devices across all continents. So here is an example of an intranet. As you can see, I underlined the A in intranet as opposed to an internet. So we were talking about that local area network. So this would be considered like a local area network. So let's kind of look at this maybe being like a medical office. And if you see these monitors, maybe think of more of that being like just separate computers. And these computers are connected to printers, maybe file servers, and other kinds of servers. And we'll talk about servers a little bit more in depth here a little bit later on. But as you can see here, this is kind of separated off from the internet, right? And so internally, this company, Internet, can access different things without going out to the internet. All of these devices could be connected either with network cables or by Wi-Fi, and it would be kind of a closed network, closed off from the internet. and that would be called an intranet. Okay, I'll expand on that a little bit uh, in a little while here as well. But so here is an example of a static web page. And as you can see here, you've just got a navigation, multiple links up here at top. What a static web page is a page that really doesn't look any different from if you brought it up or if I brought it up. There's no dynamic controls. Uh, there's not a login. It's most of the static web pages are for like information and marketing purposes. And basically, that static web page, whenever you access that, it's going to be the same. You could access it today, tomorrow, as long as that static web page has not been updated on that web server, it's going to be the same, right? Obviously, if someone who supports that website would make a change and then upload it, yes, you would see a change here, but it's not dynamic by nature. Okay. So let me go show you one live here on that real quick. So here's a local Missouri Antique Mall website. And as you can see here, you've got these different links. And so this would just be considered basically a static page. And like I said, if you go to this URL, right? This is the URL. If you go to this URL, you will be seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, right? There's really no dynamic controls here. This is just called a static website, right? This is a information marketing website for this company, right? So let's discuss how a static web page is processed. You have your client, which your phone, desktop, whatever, with a web browser on it, makes a request, right? The client, the web browser makes a request, an HTTP request to a web server. The web server gets the HTML file of that website and returns that, which is an HTTP response back to the client, right? So an HTTP stands for hypertext transfer protocol. And so basically a protocol is a set of rules and conventions that govern the communication between different entities over a network, right? And so these rules define the format, sequence, and error handling procedures for exchanging data and messages between devices or systems, right? So I'll show you a little bit about HTTP. I don't want to confuse things, but let's take a quick look here. So here's basically the semantics of HTTP. And as you can see, this is a pretty thorough, large document, many different areas. And so this HTTP protocol is basically the protocol of the web. Whenever you request a page and a page gets sent back and that web server sends that page back, you're always using the HTTP protocol, right? So we won't be worrying about too much of anything besides the basics of just a request and response. But in later chapters, I want to say later chapters, but probably in later courses within this program, there'll be some other areas that we will have to address a little more, where there's different methods for sending data, and there's different kinds of responses. So whenever you send whenever you send a request for a web page, and a web page comes back, this is a successful response. Okay, right? This is the responses you would get from a successful round trip call of a web page that returns. There will be a 200. You won't see this. You don't know this. The user don't see this, but there is actually a success message that is a 200 that's sent back with the web page itself, right? And there's other ones as well. If you request a page not found, that's a big one. 404 is a page not found. And you don't have to worry about this right now. I just want to kind of show you that this protocol is pretty extensive as far as all the different rules and procedures in using this protocol. So where would this protocol really come important for, like, if you had an idea for uh, a new browser, you wanted to compete with Google and Microsoft on the best browser. You want to create a browser. Well, this whole protocol, all these different areas, you would have to know, obviously, very much in depth, and you'd also have to implement all of these different things so that you could communicate back and forth with the web server. Okay. Nothing really to worry about here for our purposes. Just really care for right now is just, an HTTP request and response, right? So as opposed to a static web page, there's also dynamic web pages, and a dynamic web page is has a little more functionality in it, right? Um, and because of that more functionality, a web server just by itself is not enough. A web server is basically just there for basically handles HTTP requests back and forth, and they deliver static content like HTML web pages, images, videos, and files, right? But if you've got dynamic content, um, so and I'll show you, I'll demonstrate that a little more here for you in a second. But for the dynamic web, you also have a application server, and usually you have a database server as well. Okay, and we'll go into this a little bit more in depth than what the book does, just because I kind of want you to understand what this kind of means. Okay, let's just go look at a dynamic website real quick here. So I would consider this a dynamic website, right? This is ESPN. And this is kind of information. There's a lot of static content here as well, right? Like we looked at that static website. This is an information site. It's about sports, right? But there's also dynamic content embedded in this. So if you go up here, like if you see this on the right, this is my profile picture. As you can see, well, it changes quickly here. This knows who I am. Welcome, Jim. So this is stored. This is data that's stored, right? This information is stored on a database somewhere, right? It's stored on a database. And I added some favorites. I have some favorites, and here's some favorites I added. This data is also stored in a database. So if I went and on a different computer and I went to the ESPN site, I'd see the basic site really with anything. It would be pretty much similar to what everybody else would see. But then once I logged in, I would see some of this dynamic content, right? Like welcome Jim, so forth, right? So one thing I also want to kind of touch upon, the book really just distinguishes between static websites, which is just all static content, and dynamic websites that have dynamic content, right? And I'm saying really here, ESPN's more of a dynamic website, right? Have some dynamic controls. But I really look at there being three different kinds. I look at static websites as being one. Dynamic websites is kind of a website with it has information, but I also have some little dynamic controls as well. But then a third kind would just kind of be what I would call like a full blown web application. Whoops, sorry. And what I mean by that is, so here let's look at this. This is Google Drive, right? And Google Drive is a place where you can store files and create folders, store files, and has other functionality, right? I consider this more of a full blown web application, right? This is not to provide information to an audience or anything like that. This has some certain specific functionality, right? Basically for storing images, documents. Also, you can create new things. You can create a Google Doc, sheet, slides, or presentation slides. And there's other options as well, right? So I look at this being more of a full-blown web application, right? So just kind of wanted to distinguish that. I know in the book they really just consider, like I said, two different kinds. You've got static websites and dynamic. And from their kind of definition, this would be more of a dynamic website. Okay. But I kind of, like I said, I kind of look at there being three kinds: the static, the dynamic website, and then more of like a full blown web application. So I do want to go into the servers a little more in depth. And so when we're saying server, what do we mean by that? Well, it can mean a couple different things, right? One, a server is a piece of hardware, right? It's something that's a physical thing, right? It's very similar to like a computer. It kind of, and if you see the depiction here, it looks like a computer. Um, they do come in different shapes and sizes. I don't know if you've ever seen a rack computer, and usually it's like a flat little device, and they're stacked on top of each other, and them are called uh, server racks. Okay, but you can really just look at a server being a when I say a server, I'm talking about a physical server, just being a piece of hardware similar to a computer, right? What really makes this a web server or an application server or a database server is not so much the differences between this hardware, which there could be some differences as well. They could build web server. You could have some components on this hardware of this web server that's specific to a web server to make it. Because web servers, what's their purpose? To respond to HTTP requests. So it's all about input output very quickly, right? Where an application server, what's going on an application server is the application server is actually processing data, right? It's usually grabbing something from the database and returning it back to the web server, which passes it back to the client. But the application's doing a lot of processing. So so you've got you have usually computer languages running on this, and this could be there's different ones. I don't want to confuse with that, but there's one. C# is one of them. Java, Python. There's various computer languages, and one or more of those could be running on this application server and processing data it gets from the database to return. Okay, to return to the web server. Um, and then also when we're talking about, so yeah, one thing on here, the fact that this is processing data, what's kind of really important with processing data is having like a lot of memory, reading things into this list, temporary memory that's on a computer. And so having a lot of memory so this can process faster would be a component that might be in that server hardware on that application server. Okay. For a database server, what's probably important there? Well, one of the things would be important is storage. You want, a database server has lots and lots of data, right? So you want a hardware component, some hardware component, hard drive that's attached or whatever, that can store lots of data. So that's kind of the differences between maybe, kind of from a hardware perspective, what could be the differences between these as hardware. Okay. Now, the second part of this, like I was saying, it could mean from different things, is what makes this a web server or an application server or a database server is more than just the components, really. It's what what is deployed on here to make it these different things, right? And that's the basically software. We have web server software, application server software, database software. So let me show you. And this is not important for test on this for this course or anything, but I just kind of want to let you, help you understand, you know, what the difference between the servers are, and I think it's helpful. So if we go here, so here's web server software. So this first one's Apache HTTP server. This is a software package, and this one and Nginx. These are the two most popular web server softwares, and I believe these make up together about 65% of the market. And so then all these others, you can see 42 more. There's lots of different options here. But like I said, 65% of the market's these two. The rest of them, the rest of the 35% is going to be made up by all these others. Okay, so that was the web server software, and that would be the software deployed on your web server, right, on your hardware device, your hardware server, right. And then here's your application server software, which would be deployed on your application server hardware, right? And so let's look at a few of these. So IBM WebSphere, Oracle, WebLogic. Yeah, so these ones and this one here, this is Microsoft down here. IBM, Oracle, I don't know if you've heard of these companies. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard of Microsoft and IBM, maybe Oracle. Oracle's more of a database company, but they actually, WebLogic used to be a separate company. Oracle bought WebLogic. So they have their own web server as well. But these are more like enterprise level type application servers. And when I say enterprise, I'm usually talking about like large corporations with, a lot of resources, a lot of money to spend, right? And they usually have support agreements with these, and and a lot of times that stuff that the kind of work they do, a lot of these organizations are very important. They don't want to lose data. They want everything to be dependable, and they have kind of like support agreements with these companies. And so it's very expensive service agreements to help support their things, right? Smaller companies sometimes use other types of application software. Smaller companies, they probably, a lot of them might not have kind of these, these support agreements and stuff, and they just kind of take care of all that stuff in house, right? So this would be the application server software, right? That's deployed on that application server hardware. And then we have the database software. And so here's Microsoft SQL Explorer. This is one we will be using in this program. Also, MongoDB is another database management system we'll be using in this program. And obviously there's others as well. And it's kind of like the same thing I was saying about the application server. So here you got Oracle Database, IBM DB2. These are two of the most popular ones, especially like the enterprise level. You've got, there's licensing agreements, support agreements and licensing agreements. And, these are for those usually larger organizations, right? And then other, smaller organizations usually use other types of software, database software, and do a lot of things in-house, right? So I hope that I didn't confuse anybody too much with that. The important thing for you really for right now to understand for this course is that, basically a web browser sends a request to the web server. The web server returns a HTTP response, right? And for a static page, it only stays right here within this area, right? If it's a dynamic web page, a client web browser will make a request to the web server. If it's dynamic, that web server then will send a request to the application server to get certain things. Let's use an example. Maybe you've got what I was showing that ESPN website. So maybe when you logged into ESPN with your username and password, it would go through here, and then this application server say, "Hey, this is a login. I need information for this user." That would go to the database. That would go to the database. Database would return that information, and the information would be taken from here. Would build the HTML page with that dynamic data, send that back to the web server, and the web server then would send that HTTP response back to the client. Okay. Here's another, I guess, example of a dynamic web page would be Amazon. So, like we were saying before, like with the SPN, here's Amazon. It's, very similar dynamic page where, basically if a lot of times when you log in to certain websites and stuff, it remembers your login. But let's just say, you were logged out or something. You go to the Amazon web page, you're probably going to see, if it doesn't know who you are, then you're probably going to see this. We're both going to see the same kind of things, right? And so once you log in, then that's where the dynamic controls really take place, right? So we're going to talk about how JavaScript fits in. So basically, with JavaScript basically makes it's embedded, or it's embedded in HTML files either by including them as a link to an HTML file, or JavaScript can be actually you'll visually see the JavaScript within an HTML file. And we'll look at that here a little bit. But basically, same thing here with an HTML page happens with JavaScript. Browser makes a request to the web server. It's going to return the HTML, and also if there's any JavaScript files that are referenced in this HTML file, it will also return those JavaScript files as well, all the way back to the client, right? So JavaScript is a client-side scripting language, and that runs, and what that means is that it doesn't get processed on the server. It doesn't get processed anywhere. And basically the web server, all it does is it pushes this back to the client. Well, on the client, on the web browser has a JavaScript engine, right? And what that JavaScript engine will do is be able to run that JavaScript, whatever that JavaScript, it'll be able to run that on the browser itself. So when we say client side, we're meaning everything is processed on the client side with JavaScript, right? So, JavaScript is, very popular, and almost all web pages have some amount of web JavaScript, if not all, maybe I'm sure there's a few out there, but not too many modern websites are going to have HTML without having some JavaScript as well, right? Now, one thing I did want to just quickly mention is, JavaScript has been, considered a client-side technology, but in recent years here, there's been some frameworks that's come out that actually you can run JavaScript on the server, and so I just want to let you know that, because that they're in the second year. There's a course that the JavaScript for the database web JavaScript course, which we will actually be running JavaScript on the server, right? But for now, let's just look at, actually for most of the time JavaScript's been around, it's always been a client-side scripting language that's run on the web browser, okay? Let's see if there's anything else on there. Not a server provides functions. Okay, trip back to the service. Okay. So here are some common uses of JavaScript. Data validation. And what that means is, like a lot of times HTML pages will maybe have a form where it might have a name, email address, so forth. And you can use JavaScript to validate that the data is entered at all. If you leave it blank, you can validate that something's been entered, or that it's a valid, email address, and there's all kinds of different data validations that can be run on those HTML forms, right? It's embedded within the HTML to run that. There's also image swaps and rollovers, where you can mouse over an image and it changes. There's carousels and accordions, where, like an accordion would be something where you can expand and collapse something on a web page, and then slideshows is where you're showing a slideshow of multiple images, right? So let's go take a look at that. So we're going to go to a popular website that can be used just to learn some things. This is a pretty decent website for learning some of the basics of multiple different things, but especially HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They also have other languages as well. But this is a popular one. You can make some changes and you can run it and it will be reflected over here. So here's one that we were talking about data validation, right? So here's an input field, and so in this input field, obviously, so let's say please input a number between 1 and 10. So if you put in the number 10, it says good, okay, right? You enter number 11, it says input not valid, right? So this is an example of data validation. Now I want to show you on the left here some things you can change, and we are not at the point where we have to be concerned with this very much, but I just want to kind of show you how this website works and how you can change some things just to see how the results change on the right side here, what you change on the left side. So here it says please input a number between 1 and 10. So I'm going to change that to 1 to 50. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change this number from 10. This is a piece of JavaScript. And like I said, this is something we'll learn, in future chapters here. And we don't worry about it too much right now. Just doing a quick demo here to show you this, right? So I made those two changes where I changed that to 50 and I said that. So this says 1 and 10. I hit run and you'll see that change that to 50. And so now if I put in, say, the number 50, it'll say it's okay. If I put in a number bigger than 50, say 51, it's not valid. So two things I was kind of showing you here is this is a form of data validation, and also just to let you know that you can make changes, and we'll make a couple other changes to some other things here as well, so you can see this on some of these other screens. Right. So that was data validation for JavaScript. This is a slideshow where, as you can see right here, if you click this goes through the different images. You could also do it down here as well. So this is another use for JavaScript. And here would be an accordion, right? So an accordion, you click on the buttons to open and collapse the content. As you can see, that's how that works, right? Don't worry about all this, all this code over here. This is something we're going to go over in depth, throughout this course. We'll start with very small, the basic things, and then, we'll expand from there, right? So what I really just want to show you here is the different uses of JavaScript. And we can just continue on, I guess, from there. Go there. Let's see. Okay. So common uses of JavaScript. So we're just going to touch upon, so JavaScript is, one part of this course, right? And we'll be getting into that a lot more in the second half of this course. But at the beginning, we'll be starting with HTML and CSS, right? So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, right? The important thing to really remember, especially for the written test, remember that the HTML is to define the content and the structure of a web page. Okay, and I'll show you a couple examples of HTML here, and we'll discuss some other specifics with that. One thing is, an HTML document starts with a doc type, and then it's followed by other tags that describe the HTML elements within that document. The other part is the cascading style sheets, and the purpose of cascading style sheets is to format the contents of a web page. So what cascading style sheets do is it makes it look pretty, right? Without the style, without defining styles, your web page would look very bland, right? Very basic, no colors, nothing, no fancy stuff, so to speak, right? And that's what cascading style sheets does. It formats that content and makes it look a lot nicer, right? So here's an example of an HTML file. Okay. An HTML file always starts with a doc type, followed by the HTML tag. This is the open HTML tag. This is the close HTML tag, right? And then within that, there are other tags. We'll go through all of these tags and specifics with that later. Just want to kind of show you this is a basic HTML document, starting with the doc type, and here's the beginning HTML tag and the ending HTML tag, right? We'll discuss these other tags as well. Here's what a cascading style sheet looks like. And then a cascading style sheet, if you kind of let's go back one more. If you've seen like we had the body tag, right? We have these different HTML tags. H1, which is a heading tag. A P, which is a paragraph, right? The body tag, paragraph, H1 tag. So when we go in here, we see that this is a selector of body. These are the selectors, and the selectors are HTML elements, H1. So what we're saying here is for this body, this is the formatting we want. This is what we want to use, right? For the body, this is what we want to use for the H1, the heading tag, the H1 tag. This is what we want to use for the image tag. This is what we want to use for the paragraph tag. Okay. Yeah. So let me go look at a little more here. Just give you an idea. This is just a quick little run through. So here, this is a visual source code. This is one of the text editors we'll use in this course. Okay. And as you can see, it has your doc type HTML tag like we're discussing. It has your opening HTML tag, and at the very bottom, you're going to have your ending HTML tag, right? So this one actually links to a style sheet and also calls in a JavaScript file, right? And so if we just kind of click on this, actually, control click, this is our style for this page. And here's our body tag. Here's our heading tags. You don't have to worry about this. This is just a quick run through. We're going to go through all this stuff in depth later on, okay? And then here's our JavaScript. So in this, what we're doing here is this has a function called show message. And by us pulling this JavaScript file in here, we're able to use this function that we defined. This is the HTML file that we defined in this JavaScript file, show message, right? Since we pulled this in here with the script tag, we can use the show message function. And this is basically a button. And I'm going to show you on the page. We're going to click this and it's going to show a message, right? It's going to show this message, right? So I want to kind of do something here. So here's this page that's actually defined here. This is just locally on my computer, right? this HTML page that created here. It's local on my computer. And so as you can see, this is actually this is what's rendered, right, from this HTML. This is the browser rendering this markup language code, this HTML page. When the browser gets this, it converts that to what you see on the right-hand side in the browser, right? It converts this code to what's here on the right. So, you know, and this isn't very pretty, obviously, either here. This is just some basic little examples of different things. You have your different headings, heading 1 all the way through heading 6, heading 1 being your biggest, heading 6 being your smallest, right? You won't need to worry about this right now. We're going to go into this in a lot more detail. I just kind of want to show you a little example of this. But let me show you how we change things and how that changes here. So we opened up our style sheets. So in here, for our color, if we change our color here, we can change this color. Let's change this to something like that. And now if I had to hit Control Save over there, and then over here on the right side, I refresh, you see how that turned green, right? It changed something here, it's going to reflect it over here, right? If I were to, just let you know, if I were to comment out this, and this is a comment, and we're going to learn all this stuff later, no worries. This is an example of a comment here. And by me commenting out this line, which was our cascading style sheet, I saved that. I hit the control button, Control S to save that. And I refresh this, everything, all that formatting's gone, right? It's not using that at all anymore, right? Get rid of this, put this back. I'll save that, and if I refresh this, refresh this, then you can see the styles are being applied to these different HTML elements again, right? So the one other thing I kind of just wanted to show you, and this is just a preview of things we'll be doing in the future, of some of the simple things we'll be doing in the future, actually. So here is that button I was telling you about. So here's this Hello World button. If I click this Hello World button, this page says Hello World. And that is calling, when I did that, when I click that button, it actually calls this. And when it called that, it returned that message. Okay. Like I said, we're not going to have to worry about this right now. It's just a little quick preview. So I also wanted to show you is how do you, so here you're looking at this file. Now we looked at the HTML code in that editor, right? The Visual Source Code editor. But there's other ways two other ways right here within the browser to look at that code. And one of them is to right click in here, right click with your mouse and go down to View Page Source, right? And if you click View Page Source, this is the HTML page. This is the same HTML we were actually just looking at in the editor. Now you cannot change it here and it's going to update. You can't do that. This is just one way to view the HTML. So, maybe you've seen some website, you like how they did something, that you could actually view the source of that page to see what they did or how they did it. It's a good way to do that, right? Let's kill that. Let's close that. So if you've seen also, it said View Page Source. There's also this Control U. So if you hit the Control on your keyboard, bottom left, Control, and then the U, you also views the source as well, right? And this is obviously on a Windows machine. It might be different on Mac. Obviously, it's better to use a Windows machine for the stuff we're doing here on this class. So that was another. And actually, I didn't mean that to be the second way. That's doing the same thing as grabbing view source. One other way, though, we can also look at the HTML is up here. There's this functionality that's included within Chrome, like this is a Chrome browser. And if you go up here to the top right, you see the three little dots. And if you click on that and go down to more tools, and then go to developer tools, and you click on developer tools, it will show you the element. It will show your HTML. You know, and it's a shows you a lot different. It's even you can see how that's. You can see on the left hand side, it's actually going through each element, which is kind of nice. So there's a lot of functionality here. Don't worry, you know, this is something that we'll learn as we go through this course. It's, you know, you're not going to learn this day one. You're not going to be tested on this in chapter one or anything like that. So, you know, no worries at this point on this, right? So this is just another way. And as you can actually see too, there's also, this is the HTML up here. Down here is styles, right? So here's your cascading style sheet, right? Here's different elements of your style sheet, right? And so, like I said, we'll be using this in the future. This is just another way to look at the source code, right? So let's just, for the heck of it, let's go look at here. So here's the ESPN. Same thing with this. You know, that was our little example we just looked at. Well, here's a, you know, a website. You know, a pretty substantial, large website. View page source, and you can see here our, you know, our little example sample one was much smaller. But if you look at ESPN here, you know, this is about 1,000 lines of HTML, right? So it's significantly more. And don't worry about all this stuff in here. You know, I know it's a lot of this stuff is spacing. It's hard to read and understand by looking at that way. But, you know, that's just doing that right click again over there on the web browser to view that. And then we'll also do this again over here on the web browser. We click the three buttons, we select more tools and developer tools. And as you see, here's our elements up here. And it's always nice that you can, like, you know, that big 1,000 page document by, you know, expanding it and you know, collapsing it, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of take a look at things, right? So this is we talked about the HTTP protocol. This is a tool which actually uses the FTP protocol, which is the file transfer protocol. And what file transfer protocol is for is basically to take and be able to upload files to the internet, right? Upload files to, when we say the internet, upload files to a web server. So if you have some, you know, and I've done this in the past, um, before actually with this tool. So you've you can have some files on your local computer that that you're updating some website. You would take and you would use this tool to take those files and push these out to your web server, right? Now, one thing is, in the book, it talks about this as being a deployment mechanism, you know, a way to deploy your websites, which, and this is true that this is a way to do that, to deploy a website by using the FTP tool here. But, you know, nowadays there's a lot other tools for deploying websites. So this is just kind of one way to do it. But, you know, I know it discusses, you know, I think there's actually a written question to do with uh, with this as well about what, you know, how do you upload a website? It's basically using FTP to to take the files from your computer and put them on the web server. Okay, but like I said, there's other ways to do this besides just using this tool, and we'll be getting into that more later in this course. So these are the components of a HTTP URL. And as we were just discussing, the HTTP protocol is what's used in an HTTP URL, right? The HTTP protocol, which you can see down here in this second section down here, URL for this is an example of Murock's one of the files on Murock's website, right? And there's the HTTP protocol, right? So the first part's your protocol, second part's your domain name, and then you can have a path name, and then you can have a file name. Now, sometimes you might not see all of these things. Usually, a lot of times at the beginning, sometimes you'll just see a domain name, google.com, right? Google.com is just the domain name. You click enter, and it's going to go to the search page. Well, the web server is set up, configured for Google to know, hey, HTTP, when I get a request to google.com, then the page that you display is going to be the search page, right? So by default, it's going to return the search page. Now, all these different configurations that happen on this web server, it all depends on the website. They may, do it differently depending on, how they want things to be viewed, right? But the first part's a protocol, then your domain name, then a path, there could be an optional path and file name as well, right? So what happens if you omit parts of it? Well, if you omit the protocol, it's going to default to HTTP TP, right? If you omit the file name, then the default document name of the web server will be used. That's where I was talking about. All depends on how the web server is configured, right? But, the important thing is just to understand that these are the components of an HTTP URL, right? Protocol, domain name, path, file name, right? So so I will go ahead and show you that here in a minute. Let's go through because I think we've already discussed a couple of these things in the future slides already. We already viewed how to view the HTML page, right? I'll show you how to do this right here, how to access the web page, and then how to from a browser, and then we already did that. How to view CSS code in external file. Kind of looked at that. How to view that. Yeah. So let's go look at that real quick. So this file here, and I can actually I'm just going to copy this like here. So as you can see, this is a file. This is on my local computer. This is not over the internet, right? This page we looked at, just a file that I have on my local computer. If we go to so right here. So I went ahead and I used the Windows Explorer. So just to make sure everybody understands how to do that, I'm not sure of how much experience people have. So basically what I do is down at the keyboard at the bottom, there's the little window. Usually there's the control key, CTRL, in the far left at the bottom of the keyboard. But if right next to that, it's usually your little window, your Microsoft window at the bottom of the keyboard. I press that, hold that in, and do the letter E, and that will open up a Windows Explorer. And then from there, I basically click through to find it. So this is, I knew where this file was. So this is that sample file that we're just kind of looking at the browser. So one way to open that is to double click on that here, and then boom, it opened it up. Actually, I already had it open here. It just opened it up again in another tab. So that's one way to open up a page, a local web page. Now, one thing I did want to point out, because I know on the written test it talks a little bit about this. By doing this and opening this up, this is an intranet, and I really I don't like that wording on that question. But on that, it's saying how do you access a file in your on the intranet, and it's by opening up a file like this. So I wouldn't necessarily call this this is just on your computer. It's not really on an intranet. When I think of an intranet, I look at that little example we had before where that slide we had in our presentation where we had a web server, a number of computers that it's hooked to a server, but that was separate, this private network, which was outside of the internet. And it was just a little private network that's like, within like maybe like I was using an example, like a medical office or something where they have things set up to access a file system or a web server, be able to print on printers just in their private network, and it's outside of a internet type. So yeah, I just wanted to point out about this question on the chapter one here that you'll run into. So one other way to open up a file here, there used to be a point in time they used to have these different folders at the top of browsers, but they've kind of streamlined browsers nowadays. So another way to open up a file on here is to hit the control key at the bottom and the letter O for open. Control, hold it down, the control key, hit O, and then it's going to open up this window where you can select your file and click open, and it just kind of opened the same one again. So okay, so let's go on and talk about the different issues for web developers now. It's responsive web design, cross-browser compatibility, web accessibility, and search engine optimization. So responsive web design means that a website should adapt to the screen of the device, right? So if you go to we were like ESPN, right? And I'll demonstrate this I'll demonstrate this here in a minute. So you go to ESPN site on a phone and you do it in a browser on desktop computer you have. It should function, right? You should be able to use that application. Of course, you can't always fit everything that you see on a large monitor on a desktop computer on a large monitor as a phone. You can't necessarily fit everything, but it needs to be usable, right? And so I'll show you an example of that typically over. Well, yeah, here's some statistics, I guess, about web design. Responsive web design is, a lot of traffic comes from mobile devices nowadays, right? So any website that you have that's going to work in a big screen, you need to make sure they work on mobile devices, right? So I'm going to go to our ESPN site here that I was looking at. So on this site, obviously, there's a lot going on here. It's a very, very busy page, right? Very busy page. So how's this going to look on a mobile device? Well, one way to do this without having to bring this up actually in a mobile device is Chrome and browsers have some tools to do that. So we go back to more tools and developer tools, just like we did before, to view the source. And obviously you can see on the right here, we're seeing the source. But if here on the left-hand side, if you go up here at the top, you can see that. So here's a responsive. You can choose different things. So if you have a iPhone XR, it will change that to the dimensions of the iPhone. So what's nice about that, you can see that even though this looks a lot different than the desktop website, it's still usable, right? You can use this, and that's the important thing. Obviously, like I said, you're never gonna it's not gonna look the same because there's too much going on that web page in a you know to be able to show that on a phone, right? But you just choose a different ones. This is more of a tablet. This is an iPad Pro, and it's showing you how it's going to look in there, right? So it's a very, very cool tool. Years ago they didn't have this, and so this is a really cool tool they have nowadays to be able to test things on different devices, to test a website on a different device. Very cool tool. Now, cross browser compatibility. So that's basically however something works in Chrome, you create a website. You're using JavaScript, style sheets, HTML, and that needs to work. If it works in Chrome, it needs to work on Microsoft Edge. It needs to work in Safari. It needs to work on the different web browsers that are available, right? So years ago, cross browser compatibility used to be, you know, for lack of a better word, a real pain, a real pain, right? You had to, whatever you develop for one browser, sure enough, seems like when you brought that up in a different browser, it wouldn't work. So then you had to change your code for that other browser and then go back to your first browser, make sure it worked. It was very tedious and time consuming to do that. In recent years, the browsers, the companies that have the browsers, they've done a lot better job of implementing the functionality so that things are much more consistent across different browsers, and you don't have the same kind of issues you had years ago. So, in a way, I think the book says that it's pretty much not a non-issue nowadays. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a non-issue, but from the book's perspective, they think it's obviously it's much less of an issue. So web accessibility. Let me skip ahead here, and I don't think I did. So I don't have a slide on the search engine optimization. I just before I show you something on web accessibility because I wanted to show you something. Um, I wanted to talk about search engine optimization and engine optimization. Just we're going to briefly discuss this. So probably really the important thing is, search engine optimization is just all about ranking your pages, right? So it's best just to there's all kinds of tools available. You need to write your code in a certain way that so that when these search engines like Google, they actually crawl websites. They crawl websites and will rank your site based on these crawls. And a crawl is basically just a computer program that runs out there, it goes to a website, and it grabs it grabs all that HTML and it reviews that, right? And so by by putting certain keywords, by structuring it properly, it's going to really help your ranking within the search engines. So we talk about that more later. I just want to do a quick touch on that. I think web accessibility is kind of like it depends on your purposes and stuff. When companies I work for, I really wasn't. I didn't do like a lot of public type facing websites, so search engine optimization wasn't an area that was a big concern for me. Um, Web accessibility, on the other hand, really was for me, and it is for a lot of other organizations. So there's these different federal there's a Federal Rehabilitation Act and a Telecommunications Act, and there's these different sections for these laws with regards to web accessibility. So if you're a large company, you have to make sure that your website is accessible by people with different disabilities, visual, hearing, and other disabilities as well. So it's an important part of that, and especially for large organizations, these laws apply to them. Now, if you have a small company, let's say you own a small little web design company, and you've only got 20 employees, these types of things really don't pertain to you as much. Obviously, you still want to be able to uh, to build things so that well, I don't want to say a web design company. When I said small web design, just say you have a small company with your own website. That's probably the right way to say it. If you're building websites for other companies, you probably need to care about web accessibility. But if you just have a small little, like, let's say you had a law a law firm, and in your law firm, you had a website, and you only had a little small, 20-person law firm, and you don't have to worry about this web accessibility, right? But I think anything above 50 employees, the web accessibility is important. And for anybody who does government work, government contract work, the web accessibility is very important. Okay. I want to show you one website that, I really think is really interesting. Is this one here. And this is a web accessibility evaluation tool. Okay, so if we like take our Missouri Mall thing here, so we'll take that one. If we put that in here, so as you can see, I don't know what happened here on the right, but there it is. It actually tells you, it shows you the different web accessibility areas that you have on this page. Um, you know, and this ain't something you have to worry, be concerned about or anything here. I just kind of want to show you this is just a really nice tool. Be able to, I don't know why this isn't really refreshing like it should, but and actually put these. It's even going through these. You can see this. It put this in there. These H4H this. It puts these all in here, which is really cool. This is something, no need to be concerned right now, but in the future we'll look into this a little more. Okay. So that's about all I have today. Next, the next video will be on chapter 2, and so we'll continue then. Have a good day, and we'll see you later.